Welcome, tea friends. This is Barb Gully of Barbs Tea Service, and we're back with our podcast, courtesy On TV Studios. I am here with studio engineer, co-host, and arm candy, Chris Gully.
Rita Splendid. For those that are watching on video, look at what I'm wearing. We're going to talk about that.
Oh, we are for podcast 18.
Yes.
And we're back after a 2-week hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
We've been all over the place.
Have been.
So we were up north at Pemberley Pines for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We were in Grand Rapids for a special wedding, and we also celebrated someone's milestone birthday.
That's making us feel very old.
Yes. So the milestone birthday is for our very first special guest, our son,
Yes.
Rob. He's also our very special first child.
That's right.
So a little emphasis on, more emphasis on the latter, but
right. We get it.
Yeah. So we're saying happy birthday to Rob, and we're going to be celebrating a little bit more with him this weekend.
Yes.
Okay. But with all of that, we also just passed the holiday weekend, Labor Day.
Here we go. Wow. Summer went fast.
It sure did. And it's always kind of a bittersweet weekend because it's signaling the wrap up of summer.
Uh-huh.
And it also comes with some rules that may be outdated.
Uh-huh.
But
or not.
So our theme for this podcast is white after Labor Day.
Yes.
We're going to be having white tea.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to talk about this old-fashioned adage, not to wear white after Labor Day.
It might become new fashion. You never know.
Could be. So we're going to talk about whether it's still relevant and where it came from.
Okay.
All right. And then we'd also like to talk a little bit about, address some readers' feedback. And if we have time, we're going to share a fashion etiquette tip.
Very good.
And I think we will have time.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
But first, tea.
Wow.
So today I picked Silver Needles. And I got this from Eli Tea Bar in Birmingham.
Yes.
And it goes with today's theme, white tea. We're talking about white tea. Why not have it?
After Labor Day.
Exactly. So before we talk about what white tea is, I thought, well, let's just sample this and see what you think.
All right, here we go. So it is, well, it's definitely not a black tea.
Exactly.
And it's very light tasting. Kind of like a, and I don't mean this in any kind of negative sense. I'm just giving you what my tasting notes are. It's kind of like a raw vegetable, and then the after the aftertaste is maybe, and again, not a negative thing. It's just like kind of a cooking water type of feel to it.
That's an interesting perspective because the flavors are very subtle.
Right.
So when you're saying raw vegetables, you're probably thinking of something lighter.
Right.
But yes, it's known to have florals and I think it's interesting that you say this because we generally drink a lot of black tea.
Right.
And sometimes on the dark side, we drink coffee.
Yes, we're not opposed to that.
No. And for those of us who drink some of the stronger flavors, you almost have to work up to this.
It's right.
Because it's very nuanced
That's
very subtle.
Yeah.
So I like it. Though.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So white tea is the very new growth of the tea plant.
Right.
But I thought in order to provide some context, we'd go back and talk about a few tea basics. So there are 4 basic categories or high-level categories of tea.
Right.
And we've talked about them before. Black, oolong, green, and white. There's some subcategories, but those are the 4 biggies. And the difference between them is their oxidation period and how they're processed.
Okay.
So the black has the longest oxidation period. That's simply when how long the leaf is exposed to air after it's plucked from the bush.
Right.
So the black tea has the longest oxidation period. That's what gives it its darker color and stronger taste.
Right.
Then you go to the other side of the spectrum.
Right.
And you have white tea.
Mm-hmm.
Very little processing.
Right.
And as I said before, it's the very new growth
Right.
of the tea plant.
Yep.
So the bud.
Right.
Or they call them shoots.
Yeah. So one thing I'm curious about is, we're able to have different teas. Now, on one of our New York trips, we went to a tea room, and one of the things they did was they would offer tea pairings with each of the courses that they would serve, which I had not really seen before. Maybe others do it, but I just hadn't seen it. And I thought that was very interesting. So with this type of tea, what would you tell our listeners and viewers it might go with if they wanted to have a little nosh with their tea?
Okay, so great question.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say because of its subtle flavor,
Right.
it's thought a good pairing for white tea would be berries, apricots, light pastries like madeleines or croissants.
Ah, yes, okay. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to throw this one out to you.
Yes.
If you were going to pick a cheese, what would you
Oh,
select?
very light, like a brie or something like that.
Excellent,
Yep.
excellent. I would say that's
Okay.
true too.
Very
Just
good.
things that are mild.
Yes. All right.
And I love that. That's something we're going to do a little bit more of.
Yes. Right.
Yes,
Okay.
right? Okay. So another thing about this, even though it has this subtle flavor,
Mm-hmm.
this will surprise perhaps you and some of our listeners.
Yes.
It is the tea that has the most caffeine.
That is interesting.
It is. Okay.
You'd think the opposite.
You would.
Yep.
You would. But the reason it has the most caffeine, or typically has the most caffeine, is because it's that very new growth of the tea plant.
Right.
And that's where the caffeine is concentrated in those buds.
Okay.
It's a growth accelerator,
Mm-hmm.
so it helps the tea
Right.
grow faster. And it's a natural insect and pest repellent.
Okay. So you're telling me you're drinking pesticide?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, natural. It's not a chemical cup of Roundup or anything.
Yeah. Okay.
But okay, so keep that in mind because
Right.
you think as you're going
Yep.
up, the caffeine level might be going down, but
Right.
it's not true.
Okay.
Okay, so where did white tea come from?
Okay.
Not surprising, from China,
Yep.
as most teas originated. And here is kind of interesting. They didn't really steep the tea leaves originally, the white tea leaves. What they would do is grind it up and then whip it into this foamy white concoction with water.
Yes.
Not unlike, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
with matcha tea.
Right. Okay.
Because you ground up the leaves and then you whip it pour in the hot water and whip it into this green froth.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what they were typically using it in China until about the 1700s. That's when they started steeping the leaves.
Okay.
And then they didn't even export it until the late 1800s.
We didn't know what we were missing.
We didn't. So this now started to get a little bit popular. It's still probably one of the newer ones on the scene, right? But because it did get a following, other countries started producing it, like India and Nepal. And then there's this small country in Africa, Malawi.
Okay.
And they produce this very, very different white tea. And it's referred to as antlers. Malawi antlers.
Okay.
And it's because their bushes have very long shoots.
Okay.
So it resembles an antler.
Okay. Nice.
So that might be a nice tea to have at Pemberley.
I love that idea. And when it just occurred to me, now correct me if I'm wrong, shouldn't we also add Northern Michigan perhaps to that list of white tea producers? Light of day?
They do. And we are going to be going there in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
So we'll talk to Angela.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. As I recall, again, correct me, so she has, the, I don't can't, she covers it and boosts the, so I think Northern Michigan's like growing zone 4, and I think with what she does with the coverings, she takes it to growing zone 8.
Right.
Where you can actually grow tea, and I think that's pretty much their crop.
It is.
They pick the white tea there.
That is, because she couldn't mass produce black tea.
Right.
That kind of thing. But yes, white tea. So yeah, we'll go up there and
got to check that out.
Yes. Great point.
All right.
Glad you thought of that. Okay, so how do you prepare white tea?
Mm-hmm.
So with white tea, you're generally gonna have the water less than a full boil.
Okay.
Because again, subtle, nuanced. You don't want to scorch it
No.
and ruin these lovely subtle flavors.
Oh, no.
So you'd be more like, so if you're doing a black tea, it would be up to 212 full
Right.
boil.
Mm-hmm.
These you want to dial back, maybe 185, 195.
Okay.
They have a longer steeping time
Okay.
too.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of cool. And I don't think I showed this to the camera yet, but
Right.
this is where I got it from.
Uh-huh.
And with Eli teas, what's kind of nice, on their label, they actually will tell you the suggested
Right.
boiling
Mhm.
temperature as well as the steep time.
Nice.
And I thought it'd be kind of interesting too to show
Mm-hmm.
what these look like. So if you're watching this,
Mm-hmm.
this is what silver needles look like,
Uh-huh.
and you can see they're very aptly named.
Right.
That looks like a silver needle.
Yes.
Okay.
Not terribly sharp, but
No. So, yes. Okay. Good observation. So, China has two in particular. They have the silver needles. They also have white peony.
mm-hmm.
And white peony has the shoot, the bud,
Right.
but also the two little leaves
Uh-huh.
of the new growth.
Ah.
So, it tends to have a more balanced
Okay.
taste. So,
All right.
okay. Now, I'm going to say cheers to our white tea.
You're here.
And now let's talk about attire for Labor Day.
Yes.
After Labor Day, I should say.
Uh-huh.
So I see you're wearing a white shirt.
I am, proudly.
And do you know at one time that was considered a great fashion faux pas?
That's ridiculous.
You don't care about rules.
No, I don't.
But you are, I will say,
Yeah.
you are a bit of a trendsetter.
I try.
And I think, I know that you brought back the bow tie and pocket square
Uh-huh.
for a while.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay.
And I think you have your pulse on fashion.
Well, I try. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. So, and you do have a keen sense. So I will say,
Yeah.
I'd like to tell you
Yeah.
where that rule came from.
Uh-huh. So it's probably yet another way for the rich and wealthy to look down their nose on people who didn't know about this secret rule, and they were probably not rich and wealthy.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Bingo.
All right.
It started in the Gilded Age
Uh-huh.
with the wealthy folks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say, speaking of bingo,
Yes.
we seem to talk a lot about these
Yep.
same topics:
Mhm.
Gilded Age,
Right.
Downton Abbey,
Yep.
lemon curd,
Mhm.
scones.
Yes.
And I think for 2025 we might do Barbs Tea Service podcast bingo cards,
Wow.
and you're going to fill them up real fast.
Yes.
Because we talk about the same thing a lot.
Well, that's okay.
That's what we do. Okay. So, but you are exactly right.
Right.
This started in the Gilded Age with the literally well-heeled,
Okay.
the wealthy folks. So what they would do they would summer
Right.
in the Southampton or Newport.
Right. Right.
Enjoy those ocean breezes out in the country.
Right. Yeah.
And they would pack their suitcases or
Right.
have their assistants,
Yeah.
their
Mhm.
staff.
Yes.
Act-
Staff would do it. Come
Staff
on.
would
Come
do
on.
Yeah, what am I saying? And they would fill their trunks full of light-colored and white-colored
Right.
clothes.
For their croquet playing.
Yes, for the croquet playing. And we should probably bring that back.
Yes,
Okay?
we should.
Next croquet game.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Okay. So white was a great choice to be out in
Yep.
the sun. It reflects the sun.
Yep.
And also tennis was
Yes.
coming onto the scene as
Yeah.
a very popular
Uh-huh.
co-ed
Yes.
sport.
Okay.
And sweat is hidden by wearing white. If you wear white, you don't see the sweat so much.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and that was considered unseemly,
Wow.
especially when you were in the company of the opposite sex.
So I could be sitting here quite gross, and you wouldn't know it.
I know, that's yeah.
Well,
Okay.
on that note.
Yes. So, getting back to this white
Mm-hmm.
attire
Right.
that folks would wear in the summer. So, and the other thing, as you mentioned, this was a way to
Yeah.
separate themselves.
It was a marker.
It was a marker. So you're wearing white.
Yeah.
You are not going to be cleaning the house.
No.
Or doing the landscaping.
No.
You're going to be doing really nothing.
You're just going to be oppressing the masses.
Yes. In your light-colored clothes.
That's right.
So it also showed that you didn't have to really work very
Right.
hard.
Uh-huh.
So when these folks, though, would pack up, or
Mhm.
their staff would pack up,
Right.
they would, when they came back home to the city,
Right.
they would leave the white clothes
Right.
left packed.
Right.
Because even though they had money,
Yeah.
they're still practical. When you were in the city streets, it was more dense. It wasn't quite as clean as
No.
it is. We didn't have the nice
A
sidewalks.
lot of horses.
A lot of horses. So they would wear the darker colors.
Right. Right.
So they instituted this rule of not to wear white after Labor Day.
Uh-huh. And after you returned to the city from your
Yes.
from your villas.
And it was like you said, it was kind of a code thing.
Right.
If you didn't adhere to that, then they knew
Yeah.
you were probably new money.
That's ugh.
They're wearing white.
Oh.
So, but it got legs. It's tended to stay on for quite a while.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? It started to really get reinforced in the 1950s when there was just this plethora of women's magazines.
Yes.
Probably, I don't know, how much do they have to talk about, but
Yeah.
this was a common theme. You know,
And here we are talking about it.
here
Amazing.
we are. Right. But there's really, really no reason that you need to wear or pack up your whites.
Right.
And so you're doing just fine.
All right.
But I will say,
I love the validation.
yeah. So when I was looking at these different sources that were talking about
Right.
how this rule came about, some of the heavy duty references like Southern Living and Vogue.
Yes.
But again, we're not talking
Yeah.
major
Yeah.
history facts. This is fashion.
Right.
And they do cite that there were people who did kick the system, like you.
Mm-hmm.
Coco Chanel was one of them.
She's one of my heroes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
but more recent people who have gone against this fashion
Yes.
are Zendaya,
Uh-huh.
Margot Robbie.
Yes. Well, let me stop. These people would look good in anything, but continue.
Yes. I know it's not a great point,
Yeah.
but and even males.
Yeah.
It's not just the women. that
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
And Harry Styles.
Yes.
So
All right.
David Beckham.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, all these people who look good, they could wear whatever they want.
Nice.
Okay.
Okay.
So it looks like you're in some good company.
I love it.
All right. So I say,
Mhm.
let's wave the white flag
Okay.
and surrender this silly rule. We
Ugh.
wear what you want
Wow. Okay.
and drink white tea if you want.
Kind of bold. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So now
Mhm.
we've got
Oh yeah.
okay.
We're good.
So
We're good.
We're going to talk about some reader feedback listener feedback
Yes.
because we haven't. It's been piling up,
It is. Yes. And we've got to clear it out.
so one of our loyal listeners,
Yes.
Rick,
Yeah.
he acknowledged the podcast 17, our
Yep.
last podcast where we had a Star Trek reference.
Well, ears perk up when we do the Star Trek reference. We find.
Yes, for some.
Yeah.
And
Some tune it out. I don't know.
and we talked about Dr. Frankel's book, Steeped, The Chemistry of
Right,
Tea.
right,
and
right.
she mentions this Captain Picard.
Jean-Luc Picard.
Oh, yes, okay. Jean-Luc Picard. And he summons up Earl Grey.
Right.
And you mentioned how he does this.
Right. And I couldn't, it's been a minute since I watched the show, and I couldn't remember I didn't want to do the faux pas by calling it something it wasn't because we would get called out.
Sure.
So Rick helped us out.
And what is it called?
It's called The Replicator.
Isn't that
Amazing.
something?
Yes.
I know.
All right.
So
these are what our listeners are craving. All right.
So
Very good.
thank you. And then another loyal
Listener.
listener, Pam,
Yep.
she would harken back to our podcast I think it was 16,
Right.
where we talked about Vermont.
Right.
And we talked about our visit to Calvin Coolidge's birthplace
Yeah.
and family
Right.
homestead,
Mm-hmm.
Plymouth Notch.
Yes.
And we had mentioned that when we visited there, we had found out that President Harding, who he was the vice president for President Harding had died.
Right.
This is August of 1923.
Right.
And he got word of
Coolidge. Yeah.
Coolidge of yes. So Coolidge was the one who found. How did he find out?
Yes.
We couldn't figure out how he had.
Well, because when we were there, Vermont is not exactly a populated area.
Right. Even now.
And so we're in the hills or the mountains, the Green Mountains of Vermont, and there's his presidential origin story, how he got word, and this is the 20s. Phones were not really an extensive thing at this point,
right?
And travel was probably we had cars, but we've seen the roads there,
right?
So
right,
yeah. So it's like, that was pretty quick turnaround to get the word.
Pam filled us in.
Yeah.
How he got word was there was a neighbor nearby who had a phone.
Yes.
And maybe the only phone in the area.
Yeah, probably the only guy. Yep.
Coolidge probably left word with his folks because he was there visiting his family during this time. So the people who needed to inform Coolidge called this neighbor. The neighbor drove over to the Coolidge homestead and informed him.
Right.
Coolidge's father, who was a notary public, performed the oath of office.
Right.
Sworn in, and then Coolidge then promptly went back to bed.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool as a cucumber.
Yes.
All right. But the very next day, here's another kind of interesting footnote to this story.
Right.
After that, the next day, he goes up to Washington, D.C., and he is sworn in by a justice of the Supreme Court of Washington, D.C.
Right.
And he was...
now a second time.
Second time, yes. And this was on the instruction of the current Attorney General at the time.
Yeah.
And the justice didn't question it at all because he figured, maybe they want to make sure that everything was...
it was on the up and up.
Right. But the story didn't come out until 9 years later. Can you imagine keeping something like that?
It was a huge scandal. Nah, not really.
Well, it would have shown up on Twitter, I think, within 24 hours.
Right.
Anyway, so what's great for the Tea Connection is the second swearing in took place at my favorite place to have tea in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah. Okay. The
the Willard
Hotel. Yes.
The Willard Hotel.
And they have a great lobby.
I
wonder whatever became of that.
Right. It's just, when you walk in, it's just breathtaking.
Right.
It's beautiful. And it's this huge lobby. And then the tea room is down the hall.
Right.
But this lobby was...
It was where the power players would when they would come and visit or and hang out. And it was a great place to catch these people and I'll do something with them. I don't know.
Influence them, perhaps?
Yeah.
And that's where the term lobbyist came from.
Amazing.
Isn't it?
Tea gets around.
It does. So we wrote about that. We visited there September 2019.
Right.
There's a little reference to a blog story back then, but a full blog story is May of 2020 if you want to know a little bit more about the Willard Hotel and afternoon tea. Okay. So how are we doing on time, dear?
We got about 5 minutes.
All right. Good. Then we do have time for our fashion etiquette tip.
All right.
And I want to tell you that it is found in this book. This is Barbs Tea Service. 12 Etiquette Essentials, Formal Dining, and Tea Time.
Yes.
Okay. And this is on the chapter of accessories.
Yes.
And I thought it would be nice to talk about gloves.
Gloves. I love gloves.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And you do have many gloves.
I do.
And you have battery-powered gloves.
I do, yes.
You don't wear those to formal occasions.
You won't let me.
That's right. Okay, so this was once the de rigueur accessory for women when they would attend formal occasions.
Right.
You'd have to wear your gloves.
And
it, up until about the 1950s, it started losing favor.
Right.
Interesting. It kind of coincided with the reinforcement of no white after Labor Day.
Yes.
So I don't know how those.
A lot of things are happening.
Right.
It's hard to keep up.
But now it's starting to be
a thing.
It's finding favor. It's a little trendy.
Sure.
So we thought, okay, well, let's review
some
of the tips for wearing gloves.
Okay, even battery operated ones, right?
Well,
no. Okay.
Leave those at home.
Okay.
Unless you're walking the dog.
All right.
Or out in the snow. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are some rules of thumb or fingers.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to give you 3. One is generally the shorter the sleeve, the longer the glove.
Yes.
Okay.
Makes
so
sense.
If you think about Jackie Kennedy wearing those lovely sleeveless sheath gowns, and she'd have the long gloves.
Yes.
Okay. And then the next one, number 2, is when you're wearing gloves, what you do with your rings and bracelets and watch.
Okay. Well, that's a great question. What is it?
It is.
I hadn't thought of that.
Well, typically you would wear, all of those would go under your gloves. So
stay on your hand.
They would stay on your hand. You'd put your glove over.
So as you're taking the glove off, you would display all that bling that you were keeping hidden.
Good point.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought up the big bling.
Yeah.
Because it's considered okay if you have a very fancy bracelet.
Yes.
So,
yes,
one that's
you have decisions to make.
Yes. Well, so if it's a big chunky,
right,
fancy bracelet that can go over the glove.
Okay.
So good to know, right?
Right.
And then when do you take the gloves off?
Okay. When you're going to fight? I don't know. Oh no, that's hockey.
You're right. Right. Okay. So most etiquette consultants will tell you, they all agree on the fact that you would take them off for dinner.
Okay.
You're not going to be eating them.
Right. Okay.
But you would, when it comes to dancing or shaking hands,
yes,
that's some gray area.
Okay. All right.
So what we recommend is read the room.
Okay.
Take some cues from your fellow party goers.
Okay.
And as we say, when in Rome.
Yeah, wear gloves. Okay.
Okay. So, do I hear
I think so.
that sound? Okay, the tea kettle is on.
Yep.
And
it means we are off.
It's time to wind down our podcast, just like summer's winding down.
Here we go.
Yes.
Okay.
But we want to thank everyone for listening and /watching.
Yep.
I want to thank On TV Studios for allowing us to be here.
Right.
And want to thank my co-host Arm Candy.
You're
Chris,
welcome.
Who wears gloves appropriately.
That's right.
And check back on our barbsteaservice.com and our blog.
Excellent. Okay.
As we like to say,
we're out.
Please stay tuned.
All right. Very good.